so we will get started. Thank you all for coming out to the Stax Museum of American Soul Music. My name is Jeff Kolab. I am the executive director here, and we're very excited to have you for our Black History Month event and for the kickoff of what we hope will be an interesting series of programs that we'll be running throughout the year. Last year, actually, year before last, we received some funding from the National Park Service as part of the African American History and Culture Grants program. Claiborne Temple was one of the recipients of this grant as well, a much larger grant than we received for the renovation of their historic property downtown. But what we received was a project grant, and what we'll be doing starting tonight and throughout the rest of 2018, and hopefully in the first part of next year, we'll be looking at Stax Records post-1968, post the assassination of Dr. King, specifically looking at sort of the changes that occurred here at the label, changes in the music, looking at some of the people, and we're very honored to have one of those people that was instrumental in making that change, and that's Mr. Al Bell. And so our moderator this evening, Dr. Zandria Robinson from Rhodes College, will be introducing our panel shortly. And our good friend, Mr. Marco Pave. And I have to say, Marco has done some great work for us today. He was on Channel 3 this morning. He did a thing with Channel 5 this afternoon, and he's here tonight. 3 separate interviews or programs, 3 separate outfits. So it's clear that I need to up my game going forward. So anyway, we're pleased that the National Park Service has thrown in with us this year, and what you'll see, there's 3 panels on the back wall that will rotate throughout the course of every 2 months for the rest of the year, and we'll also be, and our project will be culminating in a major exhibition at Crosstown Concourse, a Crosstown Arts space on the 2nd floor of that wonderful new space here in Memphis. Partially because we're very excited to work with Crosstown and do some programming off-site, partially because we needed the space, because last year we picked up Isaac Hayes' 14-foot office desk and we needed space for it. So, but we're excited, and there'll be more information about that coming forward, or in the coming months. This is also the 15th anniversary of the Stax Museum of American Soul Music, so this is our first event and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention at least 2 people who are very instrumental in for the reason why we're here today, Ms. Deanie Parker and Mr. Sherman Wilmot. Ms. Carly Albright as well. So thank you to all of you for helping us get this started at least 15 years ago, but many years before that as well. So we have a lot going on this spring, and we're very excited about this program. We'll be back here March 21st with another esteemed panel talking about what was happening here in Memphis in 1968. But March 21st, we'll be here in this room starting at 7 o'clock, so hopefully you come back for that. And to one more event announcement, and you've seen the flyers around this Thursday, February 22nd at 6 o'clock at the newly christened Lynn and Henry Turley Memphis Center at Rhodes College. Our good friend Dr. Charles Hughes, the director of the Memphis Center, is bringing a really wonderful scholar into town, Jeff Chang, who's the award-winning author of Can't Stop, Won't Stop, A History of the Hip-Hop Generation, and a number of other publications. A lecture called We Gon' Be Alright, The Importance of the Arts in an Era of Resegregation. That is 6 o'clock Thursday evening in the McCallum Ballroom at the Bryan Campus Life Center at Rhodes College. It's free, open to the public. Please go. Dr. Chang is an amazing scholar, writer, and like us, Rhodes puts on incredibly good programming, so hopefully you'll support that. Okay, enough of me, but I do want to introduce our esteemed moderator for the evening. Zandria Robinson is a native Memphian and describes herself as a literary critic and cultural studies scholar masquerading as a social scientist. Dr. Robinson earned her bachelor's and master's degrees from the University of Memphis and her PhD in sociology from Northwestern University in 2011. She is currently an assistant professor of sociology teaching classes in Black feminist thought, hip-hop, and research methods. Before coming to Rhodes, she taught at both the University of Southern Mississippi and the University of Memphis. Dr. Robinson has published 2 books, 2014's This Ain't Chicago, Race, Class, and Regional Identity in the Post-Soul South, and 2017's Chocolate Cities, which she co-wrote with Marcus Hunter. Her forthcoming book project, Soul Power, tells the intertwined story of the Memphis soul sound and its Souls of the USA community, chronicling battles over ownership of the sound, the sound shaping ideas about race, the Memphis sound shaping ideas about race, place, and neighborhood change. Dr. Robinson.
published 3 books, their bios from. Of course I started out with a ridiculous thing. I'm so glad we are all here today. Thank you so much to Jeff and the museum community for inviting me to moderate this wonderful conversation. So I have the task of introducing these giants here. I'm going to start on my far right with Marco Pave. Memphis native Marco Pave is a gifted storyteller and musician whose love for Black folks, Memphis, and the South drives his genius. He founded Radio Raheem Music, an independent record label and artist development entity that sits at the intersection of hip-hop, arts communities, technology, and activism. Through Radio Raheem Music, Marco has consistently employed a network of Memphis artists standing in the gap where white arts organizations have failed to ensure the survival of Black art, Black artists, and Black communities. He is recently the winner of an Addy Award, along with Carlos Brody and Trust Marketing, for an anti-gun violence campaign here in Memphis, was named 20 under 30 by the Memphis Flyer, and recently finished a libretto for the Midtown Opera Festival based on his debut album, Welcome to Graceland, which you can see in April. In Memphis and beyond, Marco advocates for artists to be in charge of their work and their communities, and to create space for artists to be a vehicle for justice. So let's please welcome Marco Pave. Full disclosure, we're married, and he does have more clothes than me. That's why he can do 3 outfit changes in one day. And shoes. Yeah, he has more shoes than me too. Al Bell, Brinkley, Arkansas-born Al Bell is a visionary, a seer, an icon, a maverick, a prophet, a soul man of and for the people. He is former chairman and owner of Stax Records, which at its height was one of the largest African-American businesses in the nation. Here at Stax, he shepherded the careers of numerous music icons, transformed the methodology of the American music industry, and drew by hand and grit the broader contours of American soul music domestically and abroad, then and now. His monumental career and genius is the basis for significant portions of global soul culture, the soundtrack of our resistance from 1968 to present. Today, Mr. Bell is the chairman and chief executive officer of Al Bell Presents LLC, building on his lifelong successes as a sonic and business innovator and ushering in a new paradigm of business innovation within the greater music industry. So please, let's welcome Al Bell. Before we get into grilling these fine young gentlemen, I want to say a little bit about cultural workers. Culture workers, or cultural workers, as Audre Lorde has called them, Toni Morrison has called them, these are the folks who distill observations, be they sonic or visual, or those of movement or the body or of food, and histories, and create a vision for the future by reflecting the possibilities in the present. There is a great bit of talk these days about who is an activist and who is not. And I want to quash that right now. Culture work and cultural workers are a significant portion of our activisms, and they, in fact, are activists. And they're not just supplementary to the quote-unquote real work of quote-unquote in the streets activists. We mustn't fall into that trap of STEM versus humanities. We need culture work just as much as we need this activism in the streets. They both are forms of activism. And these 2 gentlemen that we have here today are our cultural workers, and we should thank them for their service to our communities. I'm so excited. Y'all ready? Okay. Yeah. So, Mr. Bell, let's start with you. Let's start quite literally 50 years ago. The theme of this event is from 1968 to 2018. What was then Carter G. Woodson's Negro History Week has just passed. I imagine the Stax family is still mourning the death of Otis Redding. The Atlantic deal is ending or has ended. You're signing the Staple Singers. Can you please, for a bit, take us back there? What's on your mind, and who are you in conversation with, and What was driving you as you set this course to rebuild the Stax catalog and the Stax community? It was like, cut his mic off. Ooh, is it white people running the soundboard?
Let me ask you this first. Are you hearing us clearly? Okay, because I wasn't hearing her clearly at this level, but as long as you're hearing us, great. Now you said what?
I said we time traveling back to 1968. And Carter G. Woodson's Negro History Week has just passed, and I imagine that the Stax family is still mourning the death of Otis Redding, and the Atlantic relationship is coming apart. You're signed to Staple Singers. What's happening 50 years ago?
At that time, the recorded music industry had announced and had taken the position that Stax Records is dead. That was the position in the industry. And from their vantage point and being pragmatic, they were correct. I mean, it was impossible to rebuild from that. We had lost our flagship, or our legend, Otis Redding, who was really moving us forward domestically and internationally. Otis gone. We had lost all of our master tape catalog, all of our recorded music, our assets. We had lost all of those assets to Atlantic Records, and we had absolutely nothing. Our asset value was zero. And I guess if I hadn't been one of those kind of guys that didn't then, and still today, don't believe in it can't be done, then I would have gone someplace and sat my buttocks down. But I didn't, because I feel differently and I think differently. So what was on my mind and what I was thinking about is, okay, here we are. This is reality. What's our next step? We need money. We don't have any assets. So I got with a friend of mine, Clarence Avant, at that time, who lived in Los Angeles. Clarence Avant was one of the active behind-the-scene players in our industry who interacted with the upper echelon in these major companies at that time. And I said, Clarence, I need a deal and I need some money for Stax Records. In the meantime, to at least keep us alive, I had gotten with Steve Cropper and said, Steve, Otis is gone, we've lost Sam and Dave, we lost our catalog. But really, when you look past that, our flagship artist is really Booker T and the MGs. I said, so can you go into the vault and see if you can find something back there in that library that we can get a release out, a single release on Booker T and the MGs, so the industry will say, well, they're dead, but we haven't put the dirt on them yet. So Steve went and found a couple of tracks and went to cut the story short, went over to Ardent, because nobody was here, and got with Terry Manning at Ardent, put the marimbas on the B-side that he had selected at that time, and brought it back, and he said, what do you think? Well, I listened, and the A-side that we had talked about sounded great, and when we played the B-side, I said, oh, that's the hit. He said, no, man, that's the B-side. I said, no, Steve, that's the hit. He said, well, you're the promotion man, I can't argue with you about that. What are we gonna call it? I said, Soul Limbo. Because back then, and back east, that limbo thing was hot. And what the rhythm feel that was on there, and what Terry Manning had done with the marimba was not unlike what Booker T would do with his Hammond B3 organ. And I could hear and feel that. And of course, we went into the marketplace and started getting play, and that got us some attention, but we still were there on the verge of being put in our graves. And I got with Clarence Avant And we went to New York and met with a gentleman by the name of Charles Bluthorn. Charles Bluthorn had started Gulf and Western Industries. He had done what couldn't be done. That was the first conglomerate at that time that was formed out here. He had been selling auto parts and went from selling auto parts to buy Gotcha Sugar, Brown Paper Bag Company, Famous Music, Paramount Film, and all of that. And he said, well, you know, you guys don't have any assets. I mean, what can I do with you? So we made the argument about the vision of what Stax was and what it could become. He bought into that and accepted it. Not overnight. It took several trips to get him to understand and appreciate that, and he bought into it. And at that point in time, we made a stock-for-stock transaction. That's when Stax was sold 100% to Gulf and Western Industries for Gulf and Western stock, and I think it was $4.3 million in stock value. And Bluthorn had gotten so excited about the vision, and Jim Judelson, who was his president, that he was busy selling us on getting in and doing more, because he thought we could do more to help him increase the stock value of Gulf and Western, and was telling us, you know, the stock was $40, I think, a share at that time. By the end of the year, we're going to be at $100. Well, that excited Jim and Mrs. Axton. Oh, really? Well, this is not a bad deal. Well, we got to go back now and make this deal work. At any rate, he gave us enough money at that point in time for me to have the audacity to say that I'm going to release 28 albums in the marketplace, because, I mean, that was a pragmatic business decision. I knew that at the independent wholesale distribution level, I mean, these guys make money on, and it's pennies, make money on cash flow. And cash flow from their staple items, you know, like in the grocery store, that's, you know, the bread, the milk, the sugar, the whatever. So you sell a bit of that every month and every day. May not sell the steak, but you sell a little bit of that every day, and that keeps you in business until you can sell some steak. So we needed to get back to get a position and position ourselves with the independent wholesale distributors that we had catalog, because it was all gone. So if we didn't have catalog, what value would we have to the independent wholesale distributors? And at that time, there were about 25 or 30 of them that we dealt with across this country. So I said, well, we gotta put it together and do the impossible. And so I took some money that I wasn't supposed to take, but
yes.
out of general administrative funds. So we're gonna record these albums, since we gotta get back in the marketplace and we gotta get a position. Well, we got them recorded, and the rest, of course, after that is history. But what had happened at that point in time, you didn't ask me this, but I must share it with you. I realized that the Stax that had grown here as a production company that was unparalleled, there wasn't one before and won't be another after. You talk about a phenomenon. That's what Stax Records as a production company was. I could talk about that for 30 minutes, but I said, okay, Otis is gone, Sam and Dave's gone, we can't rebuild that. We have to start something new. And this is what gave rise to the 28 album concept. I had come out of radio. Well, in radio, in Little Rock, Arkansas, Memphis, Tennessee, Washington, D.C., programming and music, I grew to appreciate the diversity in taste for music with African Americans. It wasn't just one type of music. African Americans, given the cultural contribution that we had made to music, appreciated diverse music. So I said, okay, well, what I'm going to do now, can't do Stax again, because that's the Old Testament. So we got to get a New Testament. And we went and recorded albums that appealed to certain segments and different segments of the African American music consumer population. Now, I didn't think that we would necessarily have million sellers on all of those, but I knew enough about that consumer to say, okay, they will buy X amount of Albert King. And on Albert King, we may not sell 1 million, but we'll make our money back and we'll generate some cash flow and make revenue and have some profit. If we only sold 50,000 or 100,000 albums. And it was that way with each one of those albums that were put together at that point in time in order to do that. We were blessed in putting them together to have, amongst others, Hot Buttered Soul on the Highs of K's, which changed all of it, and Be Altitude on the Staple Singers, etc., etc. So that's my thinking. That's what was on my mind. I'm a pragmatic businessman. I can't sing, I can't dance. My sense of timing is horrible. As a matter of fact, I couldn't carry a tune in a vacuum-packed can. But I can hear and I can feel, and I learned and refined that in radio.
And this is what I mean by the culture worker piece. You had the ability to read the culture and know what folks wanted to hear, and you talked about that long impact. Let me ask you, Marco, to talk about that long impact of what Mr. Bell has just said, the impact of that ability to read what this broad and diverse consumer market wanted. Well, first, to understand that the African-American consumer market was diverse, which wasn't something that white people still don't understand that. And then to think about how that broad diversity of sound has influenced your work, the cultural impact of Stax on your work.
I mean, it's unparalleled. Like the impact that it made business-wise, because I know he's the super, like this is Jay-Z to me. I'm sitting next to Jay-Z tonight.
Yes, Sean Bell, yeah. Al Carter.
So with that alone, I've been able to learn. I've been a Stax avid researcher for the past 3 years or so, and just really hearing the different sounds. If you guys don't know, that Stax is the most sampled record label in music history. From Wu-Tang to Scarface, any artist you can name has probably sampled Stax. So I was able to learn about Stax through my medium, which is hip hop, and that alone is impactful. But as I dove deeper into Stax and saw what they were doing for the community, it was really impactful. To be the third largest employer in the United States was such a powerful thing. Like now, the third largest employer is like International Paper or the University of Memphis or something like that. So imagine if that closed today, what would happen? But we don't think about it in that way because it's just music. Oh, it was just music. Oh, they were just black people. It just wiped off to not be as important. So that has motivated me to really try to figure out how to get back to a point of making music, give somebody an opportunity to make it out. Like we talked earlier, that David Porter worked at Big Star across the street, which is obviously no longer here, and this neighborhood is a desert for grocery stores and a food desert. But he walked in from across the street and got a job as an artist. At 15 years old, when I was 15, I had to go to Kroger and continue to work at Kroger until I was 18 and have an opportunity to find another way out. So I just had to independently work and figure all this stuff out and find, traces of history just on the internet and possibly visiting Stax. So it's just, the impact is unparalleled. Again, like he said, it's a phenomenon that could still be around but was destroyed, and I'm trying to figure out how to not recreate that, but recreate it for us to have our own version of that.
Right, that newness, that innovation. And I want to talk a little bit about this expansiveness that was Stax. It wasn't just, as you said, the music. Mr. Bell, could you talk about what those elements were? I mean, film and politics and can you talk about the other elements of Stax, but beyond the music, that made it this unparalleled phenomenon?
Well, in my mind, we were always about the entertainment business, and had to go step by step to get an opportunity to integrate ourselves into all of the other positions. But that had been on my mind since the first day that I stepped into Stax. I mean, I was around Sidney Poitier, you know, and Harry Belafonte, and all of these
Just like
people.
Jay-Z.
So I wanted to, and knew that we could get there, and I knew the market was there. I mean, just great business. I mean, it was colorful. But let me back up a second. I want to add something, and I think it's very important to understand this, and I'm sort of on a crusade or a soapbox now to cause people to appreciate this. But the authentic music art that comes from the African American culture is the only authentic music art that's indigenous to America.
Ashe and amen.
You know,
Y'all gotta clap for that.
And I mean, others were influenced by the various other ethnic groups that came from Europe primarily, influenced what happened, and they were influenced by our music. But I want to put that on the table, and I want to also underscore authentic music art form. The reason Stax is still alive today as music and music appreciated by people, because it's art, it's authentic art. I mean, the Mona Lisa then, Stax now, Stax then, Stax now. I mean, it's more popular today than it was back during those days because it was authentic art. And that I'd like to just make clear. Now, what did you ask me before I ran off on my own?
I don't know. I wanted you to talk about all the elements that made up Stax beyond this, because you were making, I take your point about Stax being an entertainment company. Can you talk about the wide range of other art forms that the authentic music of Stax sort of integrated with, intersected with? What were the other forms? I mean, I'm thinking about Shaft, I'm thinking about Sweet Sweetback, I'm thinking about Watt Stax. Can you talk about, and you said you had these ideas because you were being famous since you came through the door, hanging out with all the stars. So can you tell us a bit about those other parts of Stax?
Yeah, well, I was hanging out with all the stars to do like I hear Marco was talking about. Now I wanted to learn. That's what that was all about. But you know, I came out of the movement with Dr. King and saw this with my father. I'm an entrepreneur, and as Dr. King was and I am today and he was then, it's about economic development and economic empowerment. And I saw the opportunities that we had in front of us that we could take advantage of, whether it was working with Melvin Van Peebles on Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song, after Hollywood said, well, we don't want to do that because of whatever the reason. Well, as entrepreneurs, we went around and four-walled the theaters across the country and put it in ourselves. They wouldn't let us have the concessions, popcorn and all of that, but they just...
Black people always bring their own food to the movies. We don't need no concession stand.
But being a businessman and about economic empowerment and economic development, and this is a little bit different, I think, from the way that you might see it, but it's the truth. I wanted to see us do something as a people that other ethnic groups had not been able to do. Now, if you look at America with its diversity in ethnic groups in this country, and you look at them, you see that what happens is they come into America, a capitalistic society, with a capitalistic form of government. I love it. But each ethnic group builds their own economic base. And from that economic base, they then grow. You don't hear them talking about civil rights, equal rights. It's about capitalism. They elect their politicians, they influence the politicians that are in office and all that. Well, now, we were doing this, and remember, I come back from this era. We were during the period of segregation. We were building an economic base. We were building our own insurance companies, we were building our own banks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, when we were moved into integration, then we stopped supporting our banks, our insurance companies, and et cetera, and we became reduced to something no more or less than an employee and a consumer. So inside of me, having been in that period of time prior to integration, I was in my mind, I was pursuing building that economic base as an ethnic group in America, because I felt like until we did that, we would always remain a liability rather than an asset. And I wanted to see us become an asset as a people and make a contribution to the growth of the economy in America. So I got into with Melvin, and I said, okay, we need to be in motion pictures, and fortunately was able to get into motion pictures in the manner that we did. That started at that time, well, afterwards I started Stax Films. But learned through Melvin and the experience with the independent movie theaters at that time and how their business operated, and was able to do what we were able to accomplish, and that's a long story with Shaft. But we did what they said couldn't be done, but we did it, and it was impossible, but we did it. And then later on, in starting Stax Films, said, okay, we're going to do our own motion picture. And at that time, it started the VHSs and whatever the other one was at that time. I said, okay, I know I won't be able to go the theatrical route, but I can take VHS, market and promote the films that way, and perhaps create enough of a demand to come back through the theaters. And went out, and this is making it a short story, but went out and with a group of talented people, very talented people, put together something called Stax. That was a documentary of that time that still exists today and still talked about today, because it was great. I mean, you know.
It was amazing. That you don't even have to say anything else. It was great and continues to be great. We recently had an event at the Center for Southern Literary Arts, and we had people in town who had not, who weren't necessarily familiar with Memphis, and one of our co-executive directors put on Stax in the background of the reception, and people were fascinated. Some people hadn't seen it. People was coming over to me like, who is that? Who is that? I was like, don't ask me just because I'm black. But anyway, it was wonderful. Let me pick up on what you said about coming out of the movement with Dr. King. Of course, one of the main reasons why we're commemorating 2018 is because of the 50th anniversary of the assassination of Martin Luther King here. And I'll start with you, Marco, and then I'll work backwards. I mean, I think millennial generations grow up here with the shadow of King's death as a sort of specter over our lives. My mother was on the tail end of segregation. She was a sophomore at Southside High School when he was assassinated, and remembers feeling angry that he was in town for the sanitation workers strike because there was a curfew. And then, Mr. Bell, of course, you talked about sort of coming out of that movement. So, starting with you, Marco, can you talk about the effect of King's assassination, both of its magnitude as a sort of spiritual loss, but also maybe the economic drive that it instilled into you? And then, Mr. Bell, will you follow up and talk about how you really kind of infused that economic message from King into the work that you did subsequently at Stax.
Yeah, so history is ultra important to remember and to think about. I am just an avid Memphis historian in a way, and so I thought about before what made King come here. If you think about the yellow fever epidemics, the two that we had, 1878, and I forget the other date, I'm not a good historian. But those events changed Memphis history forever. You had so many people to die, mostly white people, unfortunately, and so many people to move away. It changed the literal history of Memphis. Memphis was on the verge of becoming, you know, an Atlanta or New York City or Chicago, and we lost twice within a century the majority of our population. And here we have Boss Crump come in some, just throw him in there in some area. And his whole thing was clean up the city. We have to clean up the city. Memphis was a very, 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 very dirty and unsanitary city, and his whole thing was, let's clean it up. So that's how we have the sanitation workers doing the work to get to the strike that they were having in 1968. So it's literally directly connected to yellow fever epidemic. So we have to think about our history in such a way. Like, nothing is separate. Nothing is separate. My dad was born in 1961, so he was 7 years old when King was assassinated. So for me, when I was 7 years old, I started rapping. So we can't say that 7 is not old enough to remember or anything like that. It's very much in his DNA, DNA that he, you know, used to procreate with my mom to make me. So that energy is within us, and it's scientific fact that trauma is passed down through DNA. So all of that 100 and maybe 20-year history before, leading up to 1968, is in my family's history. And then King gets assassinated, and now we can, you know, start to look forward a little bit more. Then we have the assassination of Stax. So the impact is just critical on me. Like, before I even knew, I don't think I knew firsthand that King was assassinated in Memphis until I was like slightly older, maybe like 4th or 5th grade. But I just knew like that it was a bad thing, and so I just knew that it was some fog over Memphis. I always felt this fog. I always felt like this energy, like we've been stuck. So Memphis has been literally stuck in this period.
What about how it is in your art right now?
Memphis is trying to come out and have our own version of the civil rights movement. So in 2016, there were lots of Black Lives Matter protests that have been happening. And for me, instead of like you said about being the person in the street, I can't afford to go to jail. I can't afford to, you know what I'm saying, not be away from my family. So it really made me think about making a soundtrack for the movement. I needed to speak for the people. I needed to say something that was relevant, that we all can agree to, that I know I'm going through. So it's never me talking over people. It's never me making up things about people. I'm an ethnographer just by living. I listen to stories, and I understand what people are going through, and I wanted to put it in the music and put it out there and let people know, like, these are real things in the lineage of Stax.
And Mr. Bell, going along with that, will you talk about the influence that the assassination of King had on how you conceptualized yourself as a businessman and as a person in the entertainment industry and as a person looking to build that economic base, an African-American economic base, as King had asked us to do?
Well, I worked with Dr. King, and his assassination I saw coming. That's why I wrote that song and recorded to give to him, because I thought it was time. He had accomplished what he wanted to accomplish from a passive resistance standpoint. But Dr. King was about economic development and economic empowerment. His first step was the passive resistance movement in order to position us where we could once again start building economically in this country. And he realized that, as a matter of fact, wow, I remember we had a march in Savannah, Georgia, and I broke rank. I won't go into all of that, and violated a cardinal rule. And we went back to meet that night, and Dr. King told me, he said, you know, Albertus, I know what you're about. He said, you have a lot of Marcus Garvey in you. Well, I didn't know who Marcus Garvey was. he said, but you're about economics and all of that, and you're out here talking to these young people about that. He said, but I want to tell you something. And it's important, and historically, and I don't know, I feel like talking to you and telling you about me tonight, and painting the whole picture as best I can. But we met that night, and he said, Albertus, you pulled a knife and went after a gentleman because he was interfering with the march. Well, I pulled a knife because the man, as we were marching down the streets, you know, he was calling me all kind of names, this, that, and that. Well, that didn't bother me. You know, call me names, get out of here. But I got about 3 feet as we were marching up the streets from him, and he went and spit on me. And Lord have mercy.
Wait a minute now, yeah, you gotta pull a knife.
And out of my pocket was that switchblade knife. But what he said to me that night was, what you are about, you can do, but that has to take place after I've done what I've done. He said, what you don't understand is, you haven't been any place out of Arkansas and maybe a couple other places, but I've been all around the world. And people don't know that we even exist in America as a people. He said, so right now, we have television and all of that, and we have to move in the manner that I'm talking about moving. Many of us are going to be killed, they're going to hang us, dogs are going to bite us, and we're going to have to take all of that. He said, and what's important about it is we now have television. Just so it's going to be sensational. He didn't say sensational, but that's what he said. And they're going to carry it on television. And what will happen as a result of that, people will realize outside of America that we even exist in America as a people, and they will see how America is treating us as a people. And then after that's done, then you can go on about the business of doing what you're talking about doing, economic development and economic empowerment, which is what he was about. And that's what got him killed also, because he went to a certain point, and he realized that things that had been accomplished through the passive resistance movement, and they was fine with that. I mean, that's real cool, no problem, we can handle that. But then he got to talking about Vietnam, the war, and he started realizing, well, wait a minute, we've done all of these things, but economically we're not benefiting from these things. So he started speaking about economics and made a statement of, well, we got to march to Washington now and get that check that we haven't gotten. And he started the Poor People's March, or Poor People's Campaign, but it was going to ultimately be a march. Well, that concerned me because, and it concerned a lot of other people beside me in higher places, but he had more white people signing up for the Poor People's March than black people. And when I saw that, I said, that's a problem. He can go into Washington with 500,000 of us, they can handle that. But coming into Washington, this black guy with 1 million hypothetically white folk and 250,000 black folks, in guerrilla warfare, they call that incipient insurrection. overthrow the government. They can't stand that. At the same time, it was awakening America to the extent at that level that it realized that racism wasn't necessarily about color, it was a socioeconomic issue. If you were in a socioeconomic category, then you got treated a certain way, the way they were handling it. Black folks were up front on the front page of the paper and this, that, and the other, but the same thing was happening to everybody that was in that socioeconomic group, regardless of the color of your skin. But they kept it divided, and European Americans at that point in time didn't feel the same way they're feeling now. And you're seeing them react now like we were reacting then. But that's what got Dr. King killed, because he started on his economic, and told them, I think it was at Princeton, where he made the address that he was beginning to move on the economic pursuit and move away from passive resistance and all of that. Well, so to answer your question, that was already in me. And when Dr. King was killed, I said, oh, I got to keep on stepping. And I increased my efforts, what I was doing. As a matter of fact, I got with Reverend Jesse Jackson and underwrote People United to Save Humanity, and whatever that big place in Chicago that cost so much money, put together the first Black Expo, where we could bring in African Americans from all over this country, come in and show what you're doing, see what you're doing, let America see what you're doing, these major corporations see what you're doing, and they realize that, wait a minute, there's some great ideas, we can make money with these black folk over here, so let's get involved. That was what that was all about. So I got involved in that area, got involved in helping underwrite the Black Caucus, because I was told by my godfather, went to Rockefeller, he said, listen, you need to go in and work with these black politicians that are getting elected, but you don't have enough in there to have any kind of power, so you need to pull together as a caucus. So I need you to go in and work with these politicians and help put together, help underwrite this Black Caucus so that they can have some power and have a voice in Washington, and it can change things for your people. Not just give you that part, so while you see that as it relates to what I was doing at that point in time, it wasn't just music and entertainment. It was about economics. Now, I am a servant leader. I've done all of this that they say I've done, and some things they said I did that I didn't do. God knows. Painful. Talk about assassination. They assassinated me and crucified me at the same time, but the crucifixion didn't work. They were crucifying me in terms of my integrity and assassinated me economically, because that's what it's all about. I just want to put that in there to set the record straight on what that was all about. And also, let me tell you this, you got me talking.
I love it.
In 1968, when we were declared dead, and the value of Stax at zero, literally zero, from 68 to 1975, with that 27 albums, Tyler Bluehorn, Gulf and Western, etc., through CBS, etc. By 1975, our asset value for Stax, as valued by Price Waterhouse Coopenow, was $82 million. So in 1975, when they're saying Stax is bankrupt, this, that, and the other, and I could go through all the details of that, which was a bunch of BS. Stax was valued at $82 million.
Let's talk about that resurrection. You said that what had come before Otis Redding, what had come before the death of Otis Redding, that Stax was the Old Testament. What you built was the New Testament. And in that New Testament was that resurrection of Stax. And one of the things that strikes me so much about the post-1968 Stax catalog, and you can really see the culmination of it in Watt Stax in '74. You can really see the beautiful, y'all look like $82 million. In Watt Stax.
What you say?
In Watt Stax.
Okay.
Y'all look like $82 million. And one of the things that strikes me about that music is that it is really a lot about black joy and black pleasure and a black happiness, so that after the death of, or the first death maybe, of Stax, and after the death of King and Otis Redding, there is a significant amount of jubilance, which black people have always had to celebrate that we are still here and that we are still people and that we still have joy, even when tragedy strikes.
Right.
So could you talk a little bit about the music of Stax after 1968 and that pleasure and black joy that came with that resurrection?
All right, the music that came after 1968, and quite candidly, I hated to see that happen because I recognize the value of the Stax that Jim Stewart had created prior to 1968. I mean, there was nothing like that. That's what brought me here. There was nothing like that. That was masterful. That was artistry that cannot be duplicated. And it hurt me deep inside to see what had been done to us by Atlantic at that time. But afterwards, instead of being in a position to continue to, see, Stax at that point in time was a production company. It produced the music, and what happens in this industry, you produce the music, then you go to the larger companies, and they market and distribute it. And that's what Atlantic was doing, and why Atlantic could do what they did to Stax. Well, at that point in time, we made up our minds, and Deanie Parker was a part of that meeting, when we decided that we were going to go and become an independent, freestanding record company. Well, you know, as we sold records through...
Don't dab.
Huh?
Don't dab. You okay? Okay.
Yeah, at that point in time, understand economics. We were making, with Atlantic distributing our product, and we were a production company, 25 or 30 cents a record sold. And I said, I knew and understood distribution, and I told Jim, I said, you know, this doesn't make sense. As we move forward, we need to get into album or LP production, because that went from 25 or 30 cents per single record sold to $2.40. I said, that's something we can do and build from there. We can build an entity from there. And that's what led us into doing that. Now I'm talking, but I don't know whether I answered your question, because you really have me.
I'm an ethnographer. I interview people for a living. I want to pick up. I actually want to pivot a little bit and pick up on this thing about the music industry.
On the what?
On the music industry piece of it, because
okay.
Marco, can you talk to us?
No, I want to. Pardon me.
Yeah, go ahead.
No. What happened was, at that point in time, as you were talking about, see, when you say civil rights and all of that, well, yeah, we spoke to that, and many other artists out here spoke to that. But this music was a part, this art was a part of what reflected what was going on and influenced what was going on in our lives, our lifestyles, and our living. So we, as human beings, were part, as creative people, were part of the movement just ourselves. But our music and the talent and the creativity that was coming out of us wasn't about all of this that was happening bad to us. It was about what was going on in our lives. I love you, baby. Or who's making love to your old lady while you out making love? You know, it reflected the sum total of the artistry as a
well, a lot of cheating happening in that music. There, a lot of loving happening.
Well, I mean, that was what was.
That was what was happening. I am glad for it. It's how we arrived, many of us in this room. It's how we got here on this earth. Thank you, Stax.
If nothing you is wrong, I don't want
I won't be right.
When something is wrong with my baby,
Yes, something wrong with me.
Yeah.
More people need to listen to this anyway.
It's a
Okay.
long walk to D.C. Oh, but I'm on my way.
But I'm on my way.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a pimp. Jesus, you done took us down the road now, Miss Bell. Okay, I want to ask about this music business now. Moving from a quarter an album to $2.50 an album is a remarkable feat that can build an industry, build an institution that can build a neighborhood. Marco, can you talk about streaming now and just talk to us, help us understand. I don't know how the music industry works. Help us understand the 2.3 pennies. I don't know, what is it that you get? What's different now? And could you sketch a little bit what a Stax-like innovation in this current music environment, one that is about Black economic self-sufficiency and all the other things that Stax was about. What does that look like now in this current music business context?
So before I get there, we can start.
Not too many nickels, and don't do a chart.
Before we get there, we started 1998, which was the most pivotal year for hip hop. You have Cash Money, you got No Limit. In the vein of Al Bell, Master P decided to put out his own 20-something odd albums, and all of them hit the charts. Yep. All of them went to the charts. This is New Orleans. This is our neighbor right below us. He owned all his masters. He was the first hip hop artist, first label other than Death Row to, well, they didn't own all their masters. They owned a percentage of their masters. He owned 100% of his masters. So for every album sold, he literally got that full amount. It wasn't no quarters. It wasn't no dollars. It was a $10 album. They got $10 and paid, you know, the distributor whatever their fee was. You also had Cash Money out of New Orleans as well. So you have two powerhouse urban music juggernauts coming out of the South. And they own their own masters. Brian Baby Williams and his brother walked into Universal, and they probably had guns, but they got like a $90 million deal.
Just like Al Bell and that switchblade on Savannah, Georgia.
Yeah, you gotta turn up. You gotta be wretched sometimes. So, and so they got their $90 million, and like, there was a moment like those two, you know. Unfortunately, I don't feel like No Limit's music had the staying power, but you know, Master P is still on the Forbes list. It's generators in hip hop. Like he made so much money in 1998 that he will never come off the Forbes list. Like that's like very impactful. So and he, you know, transitioned into movies and Nickelodeon, and people like, what is Master P doing on Nickelodeon? Like he should be on Nickelodeon. And in Memphis, you had, I don't really understand what led New Orleans to its, you know, economic development as far as music business, but in Memphis, 1998 was still an impactful year as well. You had 3 6 Mafia. They were Hypnotized Minds with their own label. They were, you know, they were about to pop nationally. They had already been popping regionally. Yo Gotti is just getting his rise. He was like still probably in high school, I think. And the industry was vibrant. It was thriving because that's the South. But then you also had Outkast, who 2 years prior had the famous "The South Got Something to Say" speech. And then maybe by year 2000, trap music is born. And so you have all this energy that's happening. Labels are really getting back into black music after this weird position, time where gangster rap was a thing. And then you look at some of the sound scan sheets from 1992, which was shocking the whole world, that white people in Middle America was the main people buying the NWA records. White people were the main people buying the Eazy-E records. So they really made people be more aware. And the South picked up the torch and was like, look, we're not about all that gangster rap, killing each other. We just trying to get some money and shine. So that's how you have bling bling. And that's all of this stuff comes from the South. So the South has really innovated the industry to be more about the economic development once again, and not this angry whatever. So to piggyback a little bit, move a little bit forward, you had this period from 2000 to maybe 2008 where everybody was still able to make pretty good money in music. 50 Cent in 2003 dropped not tear the club up. That's 3 6 Mafia.
Yes.
In the club.
50 Cent's Tear the Club Up.
He dropped In the Club and dropped Get Rich or Die Trying. And Get Rich or Die Trying goes on to sell 11 million records in current day. It was unheard of for a music artist other than DMX at the time, because a lot of people forget about DMX. He was literally the biggest rap star we have ever had, bigger than Drake will ever be. These are facts. Like, he sold more physical albums than any hip hop artist will probably ever sell. But the drugs got him. So there we go. But he dropped his album in 2003, sold all these records. Kanye West is coming out with the College Dropout. He has a deal through Def Jam. All the labels are just hungry for everything. Leo Cohen is somewhere at Atlantic, and so it's a lot of money into it. And then this 2008 moment when Lil Wayne started to really put out these mixtapes after mixtape, that's when the label started to really change, and you start having a more the 360 deal started to come out, where people instead of you being on your own merchandise and your own touring, the label started to say, hey, I want all of that. We need a piece of everything. You going on tour, I need some of that. You dropping a movie, I need some of that. You doing a clothing line, I need some of that. And then you have the introduction of streaming around 2009, 2010, which is very funny if we think about Spotify today. Spotify is Napster. They got destroyed for the exact same thing we're all doing today, which is crazy to think about. And the terrible part is that the streams, so you have a song like Happy, which has been streamed over 1 billion times. Pharrell got a check for like $5,000 for that record. Yeah, that's pretty messed up. So it's a tenth of a penny. There's no streaming service. Tidal pays the most, so give it up to Jay-Z for that. But it's still, if you go 1 million streams on Tidal, you can get $12,000. 1 million streams on YouTube, you might get 3 if you're really lucky. If your pennies are adding, or your tenth of a pennies are adding up right the whole time, you can get that.
So I want to end with this question about the money and about activism, and circle back to Jay-Z, which has come up several times in our conversation. And this most recent album of his, and of course Jay-Z has multiple kinds of things that he's into, has a diverse set of things that he's into. On the one hand, people critique Jay-Z as a capitalist. I know Mr. Bell doesn't agree. But on the one hand, people critique Jay-Z as sort of a rampant capitalist, concerned only with money. And then on the other hand, there is this genius to his ability to think in capital ways, to subvert what you have just described about how the music industry has figured out how to extract all of this money from the labor of artists. So to both of you, I'm going to start with you, Marco, and then I'm going to end with Mr. Bell. Can you say one thing about the relationship between music, the industry, music, art, and activism that we need to be thinking about, not just for 2018, but what's for 2068, for instance, when we're at the 100th anniversary of King's assassination, and you're sitting in Mr. Bell's seat, and then some young whippersnapper is sitting in your seat.
I just want to say that, so in '96, Jay-Z couldn't get a record deal. So he had to, you know, start his own. And so that's what he was able to do. And to this day, a lot of people don't think about it, but he's still an independent artist. And we take that out because he makes a lot of money. And I feel like he's been trying to constantly remind people that it doesn't matter how much money you make in America. If you're black, you're still black. Like, and he shows people that all the time. And coming from where he come from, Marcy Projects, drugs everywhere, and all this terrible stuff, to be able to come out and even think halfway positive is a miracle for the world. Like, he could be a mass murderer for all we know. Like, it honestly, if we're gonna be real about it. So, one thing that I definitely want people to take is that, you know, no matter how big an artist gets, we have to still support them. We have to still think about it in a way of that person is connected to me. That's how I got the drive that I got. Listening to Kingdom Come in 2006 when I was a kid literally led me to the path that I'm on. I'm like, okay, this how we're supposed to do it. This how it goes. He was talking to me. He was talking to everybody who was listening. And so it really hurt my heart when Tidal was coming up and people was like, oh no, I'm not supporting that. These people rich already and this and that. I'm like, no, they black. Like, they probably got cousins that still are poor. Like, it don't matter. Like, we need to support that. It's still a black business, no matter how we think about it, no matter if they have more money than us or anything. Like, anytime black people are doing something with money, it's not in the same way as the capitalists that white people hold. Anything black is going to be shared. Anything black is going to be, it's a community type of deal. Like, every money that I get is split between, like,
mine.
A lot. Exactly.
The end. Mr. Bell, your answer is over. Mr. Bell, could you please talk to us about the relationship in your mind today and what we should be thinking about going forward, projecting forward to 2068, about the relationship between music, the industry, music as activism, and music as an economic engine for black communities in particular.
Well, this is the most opportune time that we've had, not only as African Americans, but as independent entrepreneurs, to build and be successful in the recorded music industry. We also have to appreciate and never forget that this is a capitalistic society with a capitalistic form of government. God bless America. God bless America. I'll take this over any other place I've seen out there. But what has happened now, this is why the opportunity is there. Your major corporations in the recorded music industry did not grow through creativity. They grew through acquisitions, the public companies. They acquired Motown, they acquired A&M, they acquired Stax, they acquired these companies. I mean, these are financial minds, and they look at spreadsheets, and what can I buy that I can make money with? Now, when you deal with it from a business standpoint as it relates to the artist, it's always been, at best, indentured servants, but in reality, slavery. And I got to tell you that the recorded music business, and most people don't know this, but from a financial standpoint, is really the most sophisticated business out here. It's convoluted and complex, but when you get into looking at the financials and the numbers and figuring this out, it's so sophisticated it will blow your mind. I mean, you're getting things done to you and you don't know that they're being done to you. When you look at a recording agreement, I mean, it's a classic way of putting an employment agreement together that's not an employment agreement. You become an employee because you get it when you get your signing bonuses and all this money. Well, it's recoupable from the revenue that you generate, but not from the gross revenue, but from whatever your royalty rate was, which was just a fraction of it. So it's been that way, and it's been very sophisticated. I'm not knocking it, I'm just talking facts. It's been very sophisticated, but today, what has happened since the major companies, the big three, like over in the automotive industry, you know, when they bought up this 40 or 50 different companies we had out here and it became the big three, the same thing has happened in the recorded music industry. But so there's nothing else left for them to acquire. Along came Napster and that threw them off. And they haven't been able to get their footing since then, but they found out a way, based on this company out of Sweden, called Spotify, that started doing something there called streaming. And they said, oh, well, back in the day, the idea was to take your catalog and be able to make it available out here, whether it was through record clubs, all kinds of ways to generate revenue on your catalog, and you paid your artist royalties, producer royalties, publishing royalties, and all of that. Well, in streaming, when you go back and look at their recording agreements with these millions and millions of masters of recorded music art that they have, in all of those agreements it says that we will pay you, publisher, producer, artist, based on recorded music sold. Based on recorded music sold. But they're not selling music through Spotify. They're streaming it for free. And they are participating in the subscriptions, the $9.99 that you pay every month, they get about 60% of that. And in the advertisement, they're getting about 60–70% of that. So they don't have to pay anybody anything based on the agreements. And you know, maybe there'll be some class action lawsuits or whatever that'll change some of that. I don't know, and don't know how long that's going to work. But they're making more profits, more profitable now than ever before. But in the meantime, they've opened up the playing field. It's wide open out here. I used to pray for a level playing field to compete with these people, but it's wide open now. All you have to do is go and build your infrastructure and start operating like a business and making money. And of course, it's a capitalistic society. The minute you start doing that, they're going to come over and try to buy you. No problem. And I grew to appreciate also, kind of, you can get to a certain point, and if you don't sell, when they ask you to sell to them, then they're going to steal what you have by copying it or put you out of business. They're going to do that. I mean, that's just a reality. It's capitalism. It's America. Just know it. Now, somebody may figure out a way at some point in time how to, I don't navigate a way through something to avoid that, but then it's no longer capitalism. They're going to use a switchblade. They're going to use a switchblade. But what I'm saying now to entrepreneurs, this is an opportune time now. The most important thing is to understand the fundamentals of this business. People look at it, I mean, if you're recording, if you're an artist, your career is not that of a recording artist. Your career is that of a performing artist. And all that recorded music did and does is create a demand for you, increase asset value and name recognition so that you can end up doing your concerts. That's where the money is made, not on the recorded music sold. But our artists got brainwashed or got lost somewhere in there, and so focused on the recorded music side, because these guys play some really smooth stuff on them. You know, they put them in the Cadillacs and Champagne and whatever, Cristal and this and that and the other, and made them feel real good, had all the other kind of things that they needed to bring them around. And so keep your mind off of that, because somebody else over there was getting that piece on the concert side, and they, back in their back rooms, they had their own understandings and what have you. That's America. It's like that, you know, God bless America. But what I'm saying to entrepreneurs, don't look at this industry today and say it's bad, because it's more popular now and a greater demand for music now than ever before. But realize, stop looking at what they are doing, because what they are doing ain't what you need to be doing. Get back to the fundamentals. Get great music that you know that the people want, and if you have to get out here and sell it out the trunk of your cars, like we did back in the day, until you get the popular appreciation for the music, then do that. But that opportunity is out there now. Some of the things that I faced, you don't have to face that today. And many of those that excelled with their labels, starting with rap and hip hop, they saw some of the things and have said it to me, that's why I'm repeating it. They saw what we were doing at Stax and said, well, wait a minute. If Stax got out there and did that, and then we can do it ourselves, because Stax got out and did it itself. And even at the point in time when we were fighting CBS in our antitrust suit, we came in and put in retail relations, and when we really became a threat, we were selling directly to retailers, and had gotten to the point where we were generating as much ourselves, not even using that distribution. Luke Campbell, Luke Skywalker, y'all know about him. Luke was selling product, and he came to me at a non-convention, and he said, man, I want you to introduce me to these wholesale distributors. I want to move into the big time now. I said, you want to move into the big time? He said, yeah, I want to be big time. I want independent distributors. I said, Luke, I understand you have 18-wheelers rolling out of there with your product, selling directly to the retail stores across the country. He said, yeah, but I want to be big time. I said, don't you understand that there's nobody between you and your money? You're going directly to retail, but I can't be big time. I said, big time, you're making the big money. When the minute you make the deal with them, then they're getting a piece now of your gross revenue, and you don't know what else they're doing, because they're doing whatever they have to do to survive. So what I'm really saying in all of that, if you ever wanted to get into the music business as an artist, as a producer, as a record label, now is the time to do it. And tell you something else, and I ain't too far away from getting on the phone, talking to you, sitting in your office talking to you, telling you what I know, so you can take advantage of that, and I can learn what you know. So I can take advantage of that, and we can grow together and build us another industry out here now that's built and made up of independent entrepreneurs. That's what I really want to say.
Everybody is